Champ now.
Yes, I didn't say. What are you looking so sad about, Champ?
I'm surprised at you. I mean, I'm really insulted. That's not right, what you just said.
What do you mean, what I just said?
I mean, I'm getting a drink of water. I'm late getting home, but you talking. I said something about the greatest heavyweight champ, man. I'm a hometown man, and you talking about Joe Louis, man. Joe Louis wouldn't be nothing for me. Joe, I tell you, Joe, do you think you would have stood a chance with me?
Well, Clay, one time during my career, I was on a Bomber of Month tour.
I would have been a bum compared to you.
What's happening, my people? It's Cast Sports again, back for another afternoon with the family. That's right. You know what time it is. If it's Monday through Friday, 2 p.m., it's the Boxtorian bringing you all that boxing history. Boxing is the greatest sport of them all. That's why we love it. Can't get enough of it. Salute to Miss Cass, because without her, none of this would be possible. Salute to everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cass Sports, the Boxtorian. Today, the New York State Athletic Commission. For the next few months, well, first of all, how's the family today? For the next few months, we're going to be looking at the sanctioning bodies. But the New York State Athletic Commission was never really a sanctioning body, but they used to be a major title back in the 20s, 30s, along with the NBA were the two major titles. That was undisputed. New York State Athletic Commission title and the NBA. So we're going to be looking at all of those in the next months coming up. The New York State Athletic Commission. Then we're going to look at the NBA next week, WBA, WBC, IBF, WBO, in the order which they came into existence. Okay? So the New York State Athletic Commission is first because that was one of the two major titles back in the day, along with the NBA, which became the WBA. But how's everyone this afternoon? It's Thursday, getting late in this big week of boxing history. Tomorrow, we are going to have our profile. It's going to be the life and career of Brian Castano, okay? I guess he's retired. We always do active boxes on the first Friday of the month, but back to former fighters, Brian Castano. You think it's a safe bet that he's not going to get back in there. He made that money in those 2 mil fights and went down there with that exchange rate in Argentina and became a billionaire, okay? But yeah, today, the New York State Athletic Commission. Yeah, we got Tubio Matias in there this weekend. We got Ajit Carbayel. And this is going to be a big month. This is the first full week of the month. Big months of boxing. Like I was saying yesterday, we got Zerto is fighting next Friday. And then we got the big date with Benavidez coming up earlier in the year, but he's fighting somebody next Friday. So suppose he lose. There goes the Benavidez fight, but hey, give Zerto his props. They're to be great, I guess. And we got the big fight on the 24th between Andy Cruz and Raymond Muratalla. Security of Fimo on the 31st. And the Zayas also fighting on the 31st. Okay. Bakram Murtazaliev fighting on the 31st. I guess that's how you pronounce his name. But yeah, Jad, I think this January is a little bit better than 2025 start. So yeah. Promising start to the year. Then of course we got Zerto and Benavidez. If he wins, he's fighting next Friday, not tomorrow. Next Friday, Zerto will be fighting. We're going to look at a little history of the New York State Athletic Commission, the mission, and just a deep, in-depth dive into the New York State Athletic Commission. Today, 101 years, 1925 to 2026. I know it's 2025 on the thumbnail, but yeah, they're still in existence in 2026. So 101 years, okay? But how's everybody this afternoon? We're gonna get into our fight of the day in moments. We gotta start the show with a classic fight. Might not go back too far. Might do a fight that happened last weekend, but it's history because it's in the past. But we're gonna go back a little further than that today, okay? So let's get ready to get into our fight of the day today for Thursday. Getting ready to finish up the first full week of 2026. Now, I just said if we can get Boots and Virgil and Monster and Nakatani in there this year, I don't care what else happens after that. If I can get those 2 fights, I'm happy. Boots versus Virgil, Monster Nakatani. Virgil got to get off of the Earl Spence nonsense. Nobody want to see no Virgil and Earl Spence. What Boots and Virgil. Okay? But let's get into our fight of the day. So now, without further ado, today's fight of the day. Okay, today's fight of the day is Evander Holyfield versus George Foreman, April the 19th, 1991. The Battle of the Ages, Holyfield Foreman, April 19th, 1991. The Battle of the Ages, 35 years ago. April, okay? Holyfield Foreman. The fight of the day. Let's get into that. Start the show off. Then we're going to get into the New York State Athletic Commission. All right. 35 years ago, Foreman and Holyfield gave us a thrill with the Battle of the Ages. In some ways, though he lost the fight, with an aging yet still very much proud and determined George Foreman was able to do in his fight with Evander Holyfield deserves more praise than the amazing feat Big George pulled off in regaining the heavyweight crown by knocking out Michael Moorer. Going into the April 1991 fight with defending heavyweight champion Evander Holyfield, 42-year-old George Foreman was looked at by almost all as either a flat-out joke, a superb con man, or a very bad accident waiting to happen. Okay? A lot of people wasn't taking Big George serious coming into this fight. Nobody felt Foreman would make good on his quest to regain the heavyweight crown he had last had his hands on in 1974. So much had happened in the world since Foreman had ruled the heavyweight division. The world had seen Watergate. America had experienced the never to be recovered from the damage of the Vietnam War. The Iran-Contra scandal had gone down. Elvis Presley had died. John Lennon had been assassinated. And currently, America was leading the effort in the Gulf War. A whole lot had went on since Big George had the title. Remember? A whole lot. But there he was, back in there. The world had changed since Foreman had been away from the ring, no doubt. But Foreman had come back, this in 1987, after a full decade out of the ring, during which time the once seemingly invincible Texan monster puncher had piled on close to 100 pounds in weight and had become a preacher, right? At the time of his life-changing experience inside a sweltering dressing room in Puerto Rico back in the 70s, when Foreman died and came alive again, Evander Holyfield was a 14-year-old kid in Alabama when all that happened. This, amongst other things, put the April 1991 fight between the two in perspective. But Foreman was not back for a one-shot money grab. Or as George put it, he was not back for the Cadillac in the window. No, Foreman was deadly serious. Foreman had retained his fighting pride, or he had regained it. And Foreman had, quite shockingly, retained a good amount of his ring skills. His thundering left jab, his solid chin, and a decent portion of his punching power. Big George had retained a lot. Decent amount of his punching power. Okay? This and a dream was enough for Foreman to give 28-year-old Holyfield his toughest fight. Years later, when looking back at the fight, Holyfield with sincerity mixed with adulation explained the very real fear he'd had in the ring. The Foreman had literally knocked his teeth out during one of the 12 taxing rounds. Yet, most everyone felt it would be Holyfield doing the damage, scoring the knockout during this fight. Not many people was giving Big George a chance. The promotion was huge, as was the payday both men would enjoy. But the fight lived up to the hype. Holyfield did his utmost to take Foreman out. At one point in round 7, landing a savage 15-punch combination. but Foreman refused to fall. Something was driving George on, holding him up. Foreman's war cry mantra was, "The age of 40 is not a death sentence." Never had such an old fighter proven how age was indeed just a number. Holyfield was exhausted at the end, holding on in the last round. Foreman, marked up and tired himself, had made his mark. Somehow, incredibly, Foreman had shown greater stamina at age 42 against Holyfield than he had been able to show at age 24 2 decades ago against Ali. Right? The fact that Holyfield retained his belts was not the talking point. Foreman's superhuman effort was all everybody was talking about after this fight. The legendary Bud Schulberg covered the fight for Boxing Illustrated. The bigger they are, the harder they don't fall. Schulberg's headline read, "This a nod to the writer's classic, The Harder They Fall, masterpiece from the 1940s. But this time, Schulberg said, the bigger they are, the harder they don't fall." Okay? You just don't knock mountains down, Foreman said. And by George, Foreman, though he was still an ex-champ after the fight, was up there with Mount Everest. Perhaps deserving of a place on the Mount Rushmore of boxing after this performance. "35 years later, today, and we fans still get a shiver, a boost, an inspirational jolt of motivation as we watch and rewatch the Foreman Holyfield fight. George showed us all that anything can be possible to anyone. Traditionally and rightly, the winning fighter's name goes first in a headline featuring both boxers' names. But although Holyfield won the decision on the night of April 19, 1991, Foreman was the real victor. He got the points, but I made a point, Foreman said. Amen to that. Big George, he lost the fight, but he made the point. And then 3 years later, he won the title against Michael Moorer. Yep. All right, there's the fight of the day. Holyfield won it, but Big George made a huge point in that fight. Great performance by Big George Foreman. Okay, today, for the next month or so, we're going to be looking at the sanctioning bodies. And the New York State Athletic Commission was never a sanctioning body, but they were one of the big titles back in the day. So we're going to cover that too, starting out. Then the NBA next week, National Boxing Association, which came the World Boxing Association. And we're going to cover the World Boxing Association, WBA, after the NBA, picked it up in 1962 when the NBA turned to the WBA. Then next will be the WBC, which came into existence in 1963. Then the IBF came in 82, and they became one of the big ones with the WBA and WBC recognized them as a major sanctioning organization in 1984. Then 1988, the WBO came in. They languished for like 16 years before the other three, WBA, WBC, IBF, recognized them as a major sanctioning body in 2004. So we're going to cover all of them in the weeks coming up. Mike Grimm, salute Mike Grimm. New York State Athletic Commission today. Once one of the big two, along with NBA that was undisputed back in the 20s. For like 20 years, 30 years, through 20s through the 50s, on up in there until the WBA, WBC came in. New York State Athletic Commission. The NBA really came in to offset the New York State Athletic Commission because they were the only major title in the sport, and the NBA came in to challenge them, take them down with a peg, I guess. Let's salute Mike. Beautiful day for fishing. Yeah. It feels like spring out there. I heard some birds chirping and stuff. I was on my walk taking off stuff. Beautiful day. Salute Mike Wim. How are you today? Yeah, we're going to be talking about the New York State Athletic Commission today. We're going to cover all the sanctioning bodies once a week, one every week, and then we're going to go to the promotional companies for the next few months. Once every week, we got another series. Okay. Today, the New York State Athletic Commission is what we're going to be covering. On Cast Sports, the Box Story, bringing you all that boxing history. And remember, tomorrow is the life and career of Brian Castano. We're going to see what he's up to. He fought Mel, what was that, like 2023, something like that? Haven't seen him since. He got them 2 big paydays, and I told you he went down to Argentina and became a billionaire. Because the dollar is like $1 billion to their currency. So Castano said, I don't have to get back in that ring, and he didn't. But we're going to see what he's up to tomorrow. Yep. And then Subriel Matias in there this weekend. Azit Carbayel. Yep. I think Carbayel is the biggest threat to Usyk, but Usyk ain't doing that. Why should he? Usyk's legacy is set. Carbayel is high risk, low reward. Usyk might mess around and lose his titles. So yeah, Usyk's gonna cruise on out to retirement. Only in the sport for the love of it. He don't have nothing else to prove. Made a lot of money. Sure, fire your first ballot Hall of Famer. So yeah, he'll fight that other guy the one that just beat Joe Parker before he fights Carbayel. But let's get into the New York State Athletic Commission now. Yeah, you're right, Mike. It's a beautiful day for fishing out there. It's like springtime, but we got some little more cold spells to go through. It's just January. That's the first week of January. Right? But the way this weather going now, it may stay in the 50s all the way till springtime. Yep, they're the International Space Station messing stuff up. Never know what's going to happen. But let's get into it. The New York State Athletic Commission today. We're going to do an in-depth look at that organization. So the New York State Athletic Commission is a division of the New York State Department of State that regulates professional combative sports events, including boxing and mixed martial arts, MMA, by licensing participants such as fighters, promoters, referees, and managers, while enforcing rules for fair competition and participant safety. Established in 1920, through the Walker Law, which legalized professional prize fighting after decades of prohibition due to concerns over brutality and gambling. The commission assumed oversight of boxing and wrestling to standardize practices amid rising popularity and associated risk. A core function involves mandatory pre-fight physical examinations, weight management protocols, and ringside medical supervision to mitigate injuries, with the commission empowered to suspend licenses for violations like failed drug tests or unsafe conditions. Historically influential, the commission rules on glove weights, round durations, and fouls, and this has shaped broader U.S. boxing standards, though its adaptation to MMA was delayed until 2016, when New York became the final state to authorize professional events via targeted legislation addressing sanctioning and oversight gaps. Okay? Now, notable controversies include officiating disputes in major fights, such as the 2025 Gervonta Davis-Lamont Roach lightweight title fight, where a disputed no knockdown ruling in the 9th round, attributed by the commission to a technical review delay, prompted formal protests and scrutiny over real-time decision-making and replay access, underscoring persistent tensions between regulatory rigor and event pressures. Despite such challenges, the commission continues to oversee high-stakes events in a state central to combat sports economic, balancing fighter protection with industry viability. Okay, so let's look at the establishment and legal basis. Establishment and legal basis. Creation via the Walker Law. Creation via the Walker Law. Let's talk about that. The Walker Law, enacted as Chapter 912 of the laws of 1920, legalized professional boxing in New York State following a statewide ban imposed after the repeal of the 1911 Frawley Law, which had briefly permitted the sport but was overturned amid public outcry over a fatal fight and associated gambling influences. Sponsored by State Senator James J. Walker and adopted by the New York Senate on March 25, 1920, with a vote of 30-19, the measure was signed into law by Governor Al Smith, taking effect immediately and reinstating regulated prize fighting during the early years of the Roaring Twenties. The law's core provision established a 3-member state boxing commission appointed by the governor for terms of 4 years with annual salaries of $3,000 each. This was in 1920. Vesting it with sole jurisdiction over all professional boxing exhibitions to ensure orderly conduct and participant safety. This commission was empowered to issue licenses to boxers, managers, promoters, referees, judges, and other participants, mandate the presence of licensed physicians at events, limit fights to no more than 15 3-minute rounds, require glove contests, and impose taxes on gross receipts, initially 5%, to fund operations, which generated $75,000 for the state within 3 months of enactment. This was in 1920. Decisions in fights were to be rendered by a referee alongside 2 judges appointed by the commission, aiming to curb corruption and elevate the sport's standards. By creating this dedicated regulatory body, the Walker Law positioned New York as the epicenter of modern professional boxing, licensing over 6,000 boxers by 1924 and serving as a model for 43 other states that adopted similar frameworks by the mid-1920s. In 1921, via Chapter 714 of the laws of 1921, the Boxing Commission was formally renamed the New York State Athletic Commission, and its mandate extended to wrestling, marking a transition to a broader athletic oversight entity while retaining the foundational focus on combat sports governance. Okay, initial mandate and operations. Excuse me for one moment, please. Memento. Right back with you. take care of something real quick. And we're going to be right back at it. The Walker Law. Okay. Okay. Okay, yeah. Okay. Okay. Initial mandate and operation. Now, okay, let's continue. Okay, initial mandate and operation. The Walker Law of 1920 legalized professional boxing exhibitions in New York State for the first time since the 1917 ban, establishing a 3-member state boxing commission appointed by the governor to exercise sole direction, management, and control over all such events. The commission's mandate centered on promoting orderly conduct in the sport, safeguarding participants through mandatory safety measures such as 8-ounce gloves and a maximum of 15 rounds per fight, with decisions rendered by judges and referees, and preventing the corruption that had plagued pre-ban underground fights. To fulfill this mandate, the commission was empowered to promulgate rules governing fight formats, weight classes, and medical oversight, while requiring licensure for every individual or entity involved, including boxers, managers, promoters, matchmakers, seconds, referees, judges, and physicians. Licensing fees and fines for violations funded operations, with the commission retaining authority to suspend or revoke credentials for misconduct, thereby aiming to elevate boxing from illicit sparring to a regulated profession. This framework was codified in Chapter 912 of the Laws of 1920, emphasizing empirical oversight to mitigate injuries and financial irregularities observed in unregulated areas. In its inaugural operations, cost enactment on May 24, 1920, the commission swiftly licensed participants and sanctioned fights, enabling Madison Square Garden to host professional events that drew national attention and restored New York City's status as a boxing hub. Early activities included meticulous record keeping of financial transactions and license approvals, as documented in commission minutes from 1920 onward, alongside on-site supervision to enforce round limits and glove standards during exhibitions. By 1921, the body was renamed the State Athletic Commission via Chapter 714 of the Laws of 1921, expanding nominal scope while maintaining boxing as its core focus, with operations demonstrating causal efficacy in reducing fight-related fatalities through enforced protocols. Okay, historical evolution. Historical evolution. There's Tex Rickard, one of the early promoters of boxing. Historical evolution. Early 20th century standardization. Early 20th century standardization. The Walker Law of March 25th, 1920 empowered the newly reestablished New York State Athletic Commission to enforce uniform regulations across professional boxing, including mandatory licensing, again, for boxers, managers, promoters, referees, judges, and matchmakers, with penalties such as fines up to $1,000 or license revocation for violations. These measures standardize participant qualifications and accountability, requiring critical examinations and bonds from promoters to ensure event solvency, while capping championship fights at 15 rounds to mitigate excessive fatigue and injury risk. By March 1924, the Commission had licensed 6,123 professional boxers, demonstrating the scale of its regulatory reach in formalizing what had previously been a patchwork of club-based exhibitions. In refining fight structures, the Commission mandated in-ring referee supervision for real-time enforcement of fouls, alongside ringside physicians obligated to conduct pre-fight assessments and intervene during fights, building on earlier precedents like the 1912 Unified Code that required 8-ounce gloves and limited non-title fights to 10 rounds. Weight class standardization emphasized 8 core divisions: flyweight, 112 pounds, bantamweight, 118 pounds, featherweight, 126 pounds, lightweight, 135 pounds, welterweight, 147 pounds, middleweight, 160 pounds, light heavyweight, 175 pounds, and heavyweight, unlimited over 175 pounds, with allowances for no more than 10-pound spreads in lighter classes to prevent mismatches. The Commission initially sanctioned 5 junior divisions post-1920: junior flyweight at 109 pounds, junior bantamweight at 118 pounds, junior featherweight at 122 pounds, junior lightweight at 130 pounds, and junior welterweight at 140 pounds to accommodate emerging talent, but abolished them in 1929 amid suspicions of fixed outcomes in a Todd Morgan, Benny Bass lightweight fight, thereby reinforcing the 8 division framework as the national norm. Okay? So they went back to the original 8 divisions at that point. These protocols exerted de facto national influence as New York's dominance in hosting marquee events, such as the 1921 Dempsey-Carpenter fight, drawing 90,000 spectators, compelled other jurisdictions to align with the New York State Athletic Commission standards for legitimacy and revenue, with 43 states legalizing regulated boxing by 1925. Now, the 90,000 person Dempsey-Carpenter fight was actually in New Jersey, but it was sanctioned by the New York State Athletic Commission. It was actually in this place they built in New Jersey on this farm called Bowley Acres. Okay, yeah. So the Commission's rules, including prohibitions on bare-knuckle fighting and requirements for neutral officials, prioritize empirical safety metrics over informal traditions, reducing unregulated brutality while enabling Madison Square Garden's emergence as a premier venue under promoters like Tex Rickard. That's Tex up there on the screen. Yeah. Okay? This era's efforts thus causalized a shift from chaotic, localized prize fights to a structured industry, though enforcement inconsistencies persisted due to political patronage and appointments. Always going to have politics. I don't care what you do. Can't get rid of the politics. Mid-century development and national influence. Okay? Mid-century development and national influence. Okay. In the 1940s, the New York State Athletic Commission oversaw a series of high-profile heavyweight title defenses by Joe Louis, including his March 29, 1940 second-round technical knockout of Johnny Paycheck and his June 20, 1940 eighth-round stoppage of Arturo Godoy, reinforcing its authority in sanctioning fights that defied national boxing prestige. You believe that's Joe Louis and Johnny Paycheck right there on the screen. These events, often held at Madison Square Garden under commission jurisdiction, highlighted the commission's role in enforcing glove requirements, round limits, and licensing standards established by the 1920 Walker Law, which other states increasingly modeled amid post-World War II boxing's resurgence. Yeah, so a lot of other states started picking up what the New York State Athletic Commission was doing. Okay? The 1950s saw the commission adapt the television's expansion of boxing viewership, regulating promotions that broadcast nationally from New York venues and setting precedents for medical examinations and fighter eligibility to mitigate injury risk in an era of frequent fights. The commission's stringent oversight, including mandatory pre-fight approvals and official assignments, elevated its standards as a benchmark as New York's market dominance compelled promoters and fighters nationwide to align with the New York State Athletic Commission protocols for credibility and access to major events. This influence stemmed from the state's concentration of elite competitions, where the commission recognition often determined a boxer's legitimacy beyond local jurisdictions. By the early 1960s, the commission's regulatory framework contributed to reshaping international boxing governance, as its practices informed the formation of the World Boxing Council in 1963, amid disputes over title unification following the National Boxing Association's decision. The commission's emphasis on uniform rules for weights, referees, and sanctions positioned it as a de facto national arbiter, with other commissions adopting similar measures to facilitate interstate and global consistency in professional fights. So then, let's talk about the late 20th century challenge. Late 20th century challenges. That's the fight between Louis Resto and Billy Collins, where Resto had took padding out of him and his manager, Panama Stewart, took padding out of the gloves, and also had added that type of plaster that gets harder. The wetter it gets, the more moist it gets, the harder it gets. So late 20th century challenges. In the 1980s, the New York State Athletic Commission encountered significant scrutiny over its oversight of boxing safety protocols, exemplified by the June 16, 1983 fight between Louis Resto and Billy Collins Jr. at Madison Square Garden. Yeah, that's them on the screen there. That's Resto on the right, Collins on the left. This was at the Garden. Resto's hand wraps and gloves were tampered with by his trainer, Panama Lewis, who removed padding to create harder, brick-like striking surface. This altercation went undetected during pre-fight inspection, resulted in Collins sustaining permanent eye damage that forced his retirement. So, following an investigation, the commission overturned Resto's technical decision victory to a no contest, imposed lifetime bans on Resto and his trainer, Panama Lewis, and prompted federal charges against both of them for assault and conspiracy. And they both ended up in prison. The incident exposed systemic lapses in glove verification and corner supervision, leading to enhanced inspection procedures across commissions. Yeah, that forced them to change the way they inspected the gloves and things before the fights, because that got past him, right? He had moved padding and stuff in the gloves and had that foreign substance in there. So they did a few changes on the protocols before fights as far as checking the gloves and everything. After that, legal challenges to the New York State Athletic Commission's discriminatory policies also emerged, notably in 1977, when boxer Kathy Davis successfully sued the commission for denying her a professional boxing license solely on the basis of her sex, violating equal protection clauses under state and federal constitutions. The ruling compelled the commission to permit female participation in professional boxing, marking a shift from prior exclusions rooted in assumptions about gender-based physical risks. Though implementation faced resistance amid debates over medical standards for women combatants. Okay? By the late 1980s and 1990s, the New York State Athletic Commission grappled with corruption allegations tied to prominent promoters like Don King, whose 1977 United States Boxing Championship tournament drew federal and state probes for manipulated rankings, potential kickbacks, and deceptive fighter evaluations, culminating in the resignation of the commission's chairman. He must have been in bed with Don King because they forced him to resign. Lucky he didn't go to prison. Broader federal inquiries into boxing in the early 1980s highlighted extortion by promoters and inadequate regulatory enforcement in New York, underscoring vulnerabilities in licensing and sanctioning processes that favored influential figures over impartiality. Sound familiar? That's going on now. Okay? Vulnerabilities in licensing and sanctioning processes that favors influential figures over impartiality. That's always going to go on. Okay? Money. Follow the Mickey Fricky money. Now, the commission's handling of emerging combat sports presented further hurdles, as seen in its initial regulation of no-holds-barred events, like early UFC fights in the mid-1990s, followed by stringent rule enactment, such as mandatory 8-ounce gloves and bans on certain techniques that effectively outlawed mixed martial arts in New York until 2016, due to concerns over brutality and participant safety. This regulatory caution, while aimed at mitigating injuries, isolated New York from the sport's growth elsewhere, reflecting tensions between precautionary governance and economic pressures from event promoters. Concurrently, Professional wrestling sought deregulation in 1989, arguing its scripted nature warranted exemption from athletic commission mandates on injury prevention and licensing, challenging the commission's broad jurisdiction over exhibitions of boxing or wrestling. Your wrestling said you don't have to have all those limits on people getting injured because it's scripted. It's fake. The wrestling tried to get them to lighten up on them because it's fake. It's scripted, but you can still get hurt because there's still a lot of physical stuff going on in that ring doing wrestling. So yeah, but they wanted them to lighten up because it was fake. Okay. Okay. Let's look at the regulatory framework now. The regulatory framework. Talking about the New York State Athletic Commission today. We're going to be talking about sanctioning bodies. And the New York State Athletic Commission was never a sanctioning body, but they were one of the major titles back in the day. Mike Masick, salute, Mike. How are you today? I was trying to get to a stopping point. It's kind of long, Mike, to recognize you, but salute, Mike Masick. How are you today? Good to see you. We're talking about the New York State, deep, in-depth look at the New York State Athletic Commission. Okay. The regulatory framework, boxing rules and standards. Boxing rules and standards. The New York State Athletic Commission regulates professional boxing through Part 211 of Title 19 of the New York Codes, Rules and Regulations, which mandates compliance with federal laws under the Professional Boxing Safety Act, including requirements for boxers to be at least 18 years old and hold a current federal identification card issued by the Association of Boxing Commissions or equivalent. Contests are limited to no more than 12 rounds, each lasting 3 minutes, with 1 minute rest periods between rounds, as stipulated in the state's boxing, sparring, and wrestling law. Weigh-ins occur on scales approved by the commission in the presence of the opponent and commission representatives, typically the day before or on the day of the event, with provisions for rehydration, limits, post-weigh-in to ensure fighter safety. Okay? Equipment standards emphasize safety and uniformity. Boxers must wear gloves approved by the commission, with 8-ounce gloves required for fights at 147 pounds and below, and 10-ounce gloves for higher weight classes. All gloves undergo inspection and must meet commission-approved brands and styles listed in official bulletins. Mouthpieces are mandatory, and the round cannot commence without both fighters having the mouthpiece in. Okay, the round cannot start without the mouthpiece being in there. Female boxers wear standard protective gear, including abdominal guards, and foul-proof cuffs, with no breast protectors permitted unless approved. Bandages must be applied under commission supervision using approved materials like gauze and adhesive tape, limited to specific lengths and wraps to prevent enhancement of punching power. And you know, when in between rounds, you always have that person standing there looking. That's the person making sure that ain't nothing shady going on when you know you're dealing with the cuts and everything. Y'all know the guys then they usually have like a suit, like a like in Vegas, they had like that maroon coat on, standing there watching. Yeah, they did to make sure you don't have your panky going on when you're doing the cuts and stuff like that in the corner between rounds. Yeah, they work for the commissions of these states. BBO Sports TV and the Drunk Irishman in the building. Yeah, we're looking at the New York State Athletic Commission today, gentlemen. We're going to be looking at sanctioning bodies and everything for the foreseeable future once a week. New York State Athletic Commission was never a sanctioning body, but it was a major title from like the 20s to about the 40s, 50s. Yeah, New York State Athletic Commission and the NBA were the major titles back in the day. That was undisputed. So we'll look at the NBA next week, which was the precursor to the WBA. We're going to take the NBA up to 1962. Then the following week, we'll start at 1962 with the WBA. Then the WBC, IBF, WBO. We're going to do some minor ones like the IBO, the KGB, the FBI. No, just kidding. Like the IBO and, IBA, some minor ones. But let's continue. But salute. We got the Drunk Irishman, BBO Sports TV, Mike Mazik, Mike Rim, and Miss Cass. Salute. Everybody hit the like, subscribe. See BBO tonight at 8 p.m. with the gang over there. Part of the Sports Talk Network, the legendary BBO Sports TV. Okay, let's continue. Yeah, we are, where are we now? Let me see. Equipment and that kind of thing now. Okay, now fight conduct is overseen by licensed officials. One referee as the sole arbiter authorized to stop the fight. 3 judges for scoring on a 10-point must system, favoring effective aggression and ring generalship, okay? A timekeeper and a knockdown counter. They don't pay attention to these timekeepers, this knockdown counter, because when the guy goes down, the timekeeper or the knockdown counter, one of them, is supposed to start counting. And once the referee get the other guy to the neutral corner, he's supposed to look at the timekeeper or the knockdown counter and start where they at, not start back at 0. But a lot of referees just go back to 0 and start out. If it take you a 5 count to get the guy to the neutral corner, then the timekeeper or the knockdown counter should be at the 5 count, and that's where the referee should start at. But a lot of them don't do that. Now, knockdown occurs if anybody part other than the feet touches the canvas, or if a boxer hangs on the ropes without defensive posture. A standing 8 counts may be administered for safety. Fouls, including low blows, rabbit punches, kidney strikes, or excessive holding, result in warnings, point deductions, or disqualifications for intentional major infractions, or repeatedly doing the other things like, excessive holding, rabbit punching, low blows. Repeatedly doing that, you can also get disqualified. With the referee empowered to penalize or stop fights accordingly. Okay? So, weight classes follow standard professional divisions, such as flyweight at 112 pounds, featherweight is 126, or heavyweight is unlimited, above 200 pounds, with no catchweight fights permitted without commission approval to maintain competitive equity. Yeah, you got to get the commission. Whatever's not just New York State, whatever state you're in, the commission has to approve a catchweight, not just the fighters and the sanctioning bodies and the promoters. The commission has to also approve that, whatever jurisdiction the fight is occurring in. The medical examinations are required pre-licensure and pre-fight, including blood tests for HIV, hepatitis, and other communicable diseases, with suspensions for excessive dehydration or failed neurological assessments. The New York State Athletic Commission also enforces instant replay protocols for ambiguous knockdowns or fouls, reviewable during rest periods by the referee and supervisor, though outcomes stand absent. Clear error. Got to be crystal clear to be overturned. If it's not crystal clear, you have to go with what the call from the referee was. You have to have clear evidence to overturn any call by the referee. These standards prioritize empirical safety data drawn from historical incident rates to refine protocols like mandatory corner inspections and post-fight assessments. Okay? All right. Give it me for a moment. We got to go past some MMA stuff. Okay, licensing and official assignments. Okay, licensing and official assignments. You know, like assigning referees, judges, all that kind of stuff. Licensing and official assignments. It's 3:00. I only been on here like 10 minutes. Wow. We're going to get it in. Now, the New York State Athletic Commission mandates licenses for all individuals participating in professional boxing or mixed martial arts contests and exhibitions within the state, encompassing boxers, managed boxers, mixed martial artists, promoters, managers, seconds, or trainers, matchmakers, referees, judges, and timekeepers. Everybody got to have a license. You can't just come in and say, well, my boy going to judge this fight. You got to have a license, okay? And just go down the street and say, hey, Jim, you want to judge this fight tonight? Come on. No, you got to have a license. Such licenses must be obtained prior to any involvement in these activities, with separate provisions for promoters of professional wrestling exhibitions and sanctioning entities overseeing combated sports. You got to have your license before the thing starts. You can't say, well, I'm going to do this fight first, then I'm going to go get my license and come back. Got to have your license before the event begins, okay? But like BVO coming in, well, I'm going to get my license later on, man. Let me referee this fight. Salute BVO, okay? The applications require submission of designated forms to the commission, along with fees such as $50 for a boxing referee or judge license and $10 for a timekeeper license and supporting documentation. Combatants must undergo an annual complete physical examination by a licensed medical doctor or doctor of osteopathic medicine, valid for the 1-year licensing period, as well as a dilated eye examination by an ophthalmologist, okay? And promoters are additionally required to furnish bonds and upon commission requests, demonstrate proof of financial capability to cover event obligations. Yeah, the promoter got to show proof that he got the money to pay everybody, right? You can't do a Donald Trump coming in when the thing over disappear. Nobody. Or Oscar did that. Have Devin and Ryan got paid yet from Oscar? Yeah, you got to show proof to the commission that you can cover all the costs of the event if you're the promoter. The licenses for managers of professional boxers or mixed martial artists incorporate training standards to ensure competency in oversight and contractual matters. Okay? And the commission assigns officials, okay? Not the promoter, not the sanctioning body, not the fighters' managers. The commission, whatever jurisdiction you're in, the commission assigns the officials, including the referee, the judges, the timekeepers, and ringside physicians. The commission assigns all these people to events based on factors such as the fight rounds, card composition, and title status, with minimum staffing levels like 2 physicians at weigh-ins and 3 at the event venue. This might differ in different jurisdictions. This is for New York, where you have to have at least 2 physicians at the weigh-ins and 3 at the event venue. That might not be in every state, but this is New York that we're talking about today, okay? It varies. That's why I'm always saying everything should be the same for every jurisdiction, every state, but it varies. But for New York, you gotta have 2 physicians at the weigh-in and 3 at the event venue, okay? Newly licensed referees for professional boxing must first handle at least 4 4-round preliminary fights to qualify for assignments involving 6 or more rounds. So before you can do like a championship fight or 6 or more rounds, you got to do 4 4-round fights first, okay? Now, officials assigned to championship fights may also officiate undercard fights, subject to venue capacity thresholds exceeding 5,000 spectators for additional per diem compensation in lower purse events. Yeah, we always see that. Like when you see these cards, you normally see the referee do more than one fight on the card, right? Like the referee might do the first fight, the third fight, but the judge is the same. They don't just come and just do one fight on the card. Most of them do several, right? Compensation adheres to a structured fee schedule, differentiated by discipline, event scale, and purse values. For professional boxing championship fights with purses over $1 million, referees receive the greater of 0.2% of the purses or $3,000 per fight, while judges get 0.13% or $2,000 per fight. Wow. So if a referee do fights, he's gonna get at least $6,000 in New York, whichever is higher. The 2% for the referee, the 30% for the judges, or $3,000 for the referee, $2,000 for the judges. Damn, I might have to take the referee's examination. You do 2 fights on a card, that's $6,000 in New York. Wow. The undercard per diem, that's for the main events. Undercard per diem ranges from $300 for referees in smaller venues to $800 in larger ones. In mixed martial arts, fees scale with combined purses reaching $1,200 for referees and $1,000 for judges. Okay. Now, assignments beyond 100 miles from an official's location include promoter-provided round-trip travel and lodging, plus $50 daily meal allowance. Cancellations after travel incur $100 plus reimbursement. Organizational structure. Okay. Organizational structure. Now, commission membership and leadership. Now we're going to talk about the actual people in the commission now. Commission membership and leadership. Okay, this is for the New York State. It varies with whatever location or jurisdiction you're in. But for the New York State Athletic Commission consists of 5 commissioners appointed by the governor of New York, with one designated as chair to provide policy direction and oversight for regulating professional combative sports, including boxing, mixed martial arts, and wrestling. These appointments emphasize expertise in areas such as medicine, sports administration, and community leadership to ensure decisions prioritize athlete safety, event integrity, and compliance with state law under Article 41 of the General Business Law. The structure expanded from 3 to 5 members via legislation enacted in 2015, reflecting a need for broader representation amid growing regulatory demands. So up until 2015, the New York State Athletic Commission had 3 members. it was expanded to 5. Some states might still have 3. Okay, but it varies. Okay, now I'm not gonna go through the names of the actual commissioners. Okay, we don't need to know that. The New York State Athletic Commission has 5 on the panel. Okay, now commissioners serve to adjudicate licensing, rule enforcement, and disciplinary matters, often drawing on their professional backgrounds for informed rulings on medicine, suspensions, and event approvals. Okay. Operationally, the commission is supported by an executive director responsible for administrative functions, licensing coordination, and implementation of commission directives. Now, Kim Sumler held the role of the executive director of the New York State Athletic Commission from 2016 until her resignation on May 8, 2024, after which Matthew DeLeglio assumed duties as acting executive director. I think he probably still is, Matthew DeLeglio. He became acting in 2024. Now, the executive director works alongside a chief medical officer and staff to handle daily oversight, including official assignments and compliance monitoring, ensuring alignment with the commissioner's strategic guidance. Now, the enforcement mechanism and oversight. Okay, this is when actual suspensions and all that kind of stuff. Okay, when somebody get caught with their hand in the cookie jar. Enforcement mechanisms and oversight. Okay, now the New York State Athletic, that's a big baby. Remember, he had at court 30. That was the New York State Athletic Commission. Now, let's talk about it. The New York State Athletic Commission enforces regulations through mandatory licensing requirements for all participants in professional boxing and mixed martial arts events. Again, including fighters, promoters, managers, seconds, judges, referees, and physicians, with non-compliance resulting in event prohibition or participant disqualifications. Commission-appointed officials supervise weigh-ins, medical examinations, and fight proceedings to verify adherence to safety protocols such as pre-fight neurological and ophthalmological screenings for boxers. Violations detected via on-site inspections or post-event reviews trigger investigations with the commission empowered under 19 NYCRR Part 206 to impose administrative sanctions. Drug enforcement constitutes a core mechanism as the commission mandates random and targeted testing for prohibited substances, authorizing urine, blood, or hair sample collection from licensed athletes before and after fights. Positive tests lead to presumptive suspensions pending hearing, where fighters may present evidence of therapeutic use, exemptions, or contamination, though the commission retains discretion to rule outcomes as no contest and for fit person. You know, common contaminations like Canelo said he didn't take that stuff, the cow ate it, then he ate the cow meat. That's how he got, the stuff got in the system, remember? Amir Khan said he shook somebody's hand, that's how he got the illegal substance in his system. I don't know what Conor Benn did. Conor Benn had every illegal substance known to man in him. Even had some pregnancy medication in it. But yeah, you can say it was some kind of contamination, though they usually be lying. But anyway, the commission retains discretion to rule outcomes as no contest and forfeit person. For instance, in June of 2024, Ryan Garcia received a 1-year suspension and had his April 2024 win over Devin Haney declared a no contest after testing positive for Ostarine, with $1.2 million withheld purse funds donated to charities. You know damn well they ain't donated to no charity. Them commissioners put that, some of it in their pocket. All of it didn't go to charity. Similarly, that's him up there, Gerald Miller. That's Big Baby up there. Similarly, Gerald Miller faced a 2-year ban in December 2020 for multiple PED violations ahead of a scheduled fight. Multiple. Big Baby had multiple. Wow. Al Booger. What's up, Al Booger? It's taking me a while to recognize y'all because it's long. I'm trying to be coming to a stopping point. But what's up, Al Booger? How are you? We talking about the New York State Athletic Commission today. Yeah, Big Baby had multiple violations. Okay. Multiple PED violations ahead of a scheduled fight. Now, penalties for broader rules infractions, including fouls, contractual breaches, or safety lapses, encompass fines up to $50,000 per violation. License suspensions ranging from months to indefinite terms, and event cancellations as delineated in the state's boxing law. Historical applications include the 1967 suspension of Muhammad Ali's license for draft refusal, upheld amid legal challenges asserting equal protection violations. Refusal to license occurs for excessive ring mileage or health risks, as in the early 20th century denial of Bob Fitzsimmons due to accumulated damage. Yeah, he had got so much damage that he was back in the 1800s, late 1800s. He had got so much damage in fights that they denied him a license. Okay, accumulated damage. Now, oversight operates via internal hierarchies with a chairman directing enforcement and 3 commissioners reviewing rulings through formal hearings, appealable to state courts under administrative procedural laws. As a division of the New York Department of State, the commission undergoes budgetary and operational scrutiny from the governor's office and legislature, including periodic audits for fiscal accountability, though critics have noted lapses in proactive safety monitoring amid high-profile injuries. External validation includes collaboration with federal bodies like the Association of Boxing Commissions for Uniform Standards, ensuring interstate reciprocity while maintaining state-specific authority. That's who I blame all this corruption on, the Association of Boxing Commissions, because they're the ones that's supposed to oversee the state commissions and keep them in line. But, you know, they got their hands out. They are corrupt. You know, they getting paid by all these state commissions and they look the other way. The ABC, Association of Boxing Commissions, supposed to police the state commissions, but they don't. Now, notable decisions and events. We're going to talk about some notable suspensions, fines, that type of thing. Notable decisions and events that's happened. Thomas Hill in the building. What's up, Thomas Hill? We're talking about the New York State Athletic Commission. Now we're going to talk about some notable decisions and events, fines, suspensions, things like that has happened. See who on the screen. Okay. We just talked about that a minute ago. Okay, here we go. Notable decisions and events. High-profile sanctions and rulings. Again, in 2024, the New York State Athletic Commission issued a 1-year suspension to boxer Ryan Garcia following positive tests for the banned substance Ostarine in connection with his April fight against Devin Haney, 2024, ruling the majority decision victory a no contest and ordering forfeiture of his $1.2 million purse. Now, they claim they gave it to charity, but some of those commission members' bank accounts probably got a little bit fatter too. Now, the suspension, effective until April 20th, 2025, required Garcia to undergo drug testing for eligibility reinstatement to fight in New York. In June 2022, middleweight Edgar Berlanga received a 6-month suspension and $10,000 fine from the commission for biting opponent Rourke Knapp during their fight. Remember that he bit the man, resulting in partial purse deduction and exclusion from year-end events. Yeah, I think he got suspended for about 6 months, didn't he? Remember, Berlanga bit the guy. We all saw that. Now, the commission has enforced post-fight medical suspensions in major MMA events, such as the UFC 281 in November 2022, where 19 fighters, including Frankie Edgar, he got 90 days after a knockout, and Dominic Reyes, also 90 days. They face indefinite terms pending clearance after knockout, reflecting standard protocols for injury assessment. Similarly, after UFC 309 in November 2024, John Jones received a brief suspension for his win over Stipe Miocic, emphasizing precautionary measures. In MMA, the New York State Athletic Commission suspended Charles Oliveira indefinitely in April 2017 for jumping onto the cage in celebration after UFC 210, citing rule violations on conduct. Okay? And then a March 2025 ruling upheld the majority draw in Gervonta Davis versus Lamont Roach Jr., despite acknowledging referee Steve Willis's error in failing to score a 9th-round knockdown due to a technical issue preventing timely replay review. The commission declined to alter the outcome during criticism for procedural lapses. Yeah, they drew criticism for not changing that from a draw, right? Because a lot of people thought that there was definitely a knockdown. Hank took the knee, remember? But the commission didn't change it. They drew major criticism for that. Now let's talk about the Muhammad Ali case. The Muhammad Ali case, okay? That was a big one. In April 1967, Muhammad Ali refused induction into the United States Army, citing conscientious objection based on his religious beliefs as a Muslim in opposition to the Vietnam War due to his religion. On the same day, April 28th, the New York State Athletic Commission unanimously suspended Ali's boxing license indefinitely and withdrew official recognition of him as world heavyweight champion, stating that his actions were detrimental to the interests of boxing generally and the best interests of the people of the state of New York. This decision preceded any formal charges or conviction against Ali, effectively barring him from professional boxing in New York, a primary venue for major fights at that time, and prompted similar suspensions by athletic commissions all over the country, right? In other states, resulting in a de facto nationwide ban that lasted over 3 years for Ali. Now, Ali was convicted of draft evasion on June 20th, 1967, and sentenced to 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine, though he remained free on appeal and never actually served any prison time. And he continued to challenge the boxing suspensions legally. In September 1969, Ali applied to the New York State Athletic Commission for renewal of his expired license, but the commission denied the request, citing his ongoing federal conviction. Ali then filed suit in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, arguing that the 1967 suspension violated his due process rights under the 14th Amendment by occurring without prior notice of an opportunity for a hearing. Yeah, and the Supreme Court sided with him too. Remember? On August 12, 1970, the district court ruled in Muhammad Ali versus State Athletic Commission, after they took it all the way to the Supreme Court, that the New York State Athletic Commission suspension was unconstitutional as it presumed guilt without procedural safeguards and failed to provide evidence of direct harm to boxing interests beyond Ali's draft refusal. The court ordered the reinstatement of Ali's license, enabling his return to the ring in New York. His first fight there, post-suspension, was against Oscar Bonavena on December 7, 1970, at the Garden, Madison Square Garden. Yeah, okay. He did take it to the Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court later unanimously overturned Ali's draft evasion conviction on June 25, 1971, in Clay versus United States, citing improper denial of his conscientious objector status, which further validated his position, but did not directly alter the New York State Athletic Commission's prior regulatory actions. The case highlighted tensions between Athletic Commission's authority to protect public interest and constitutional protections against arbitrary delicensing, influencing subsequent oversight of high-profile athletes. Yeah. Okay. So, controversies and criticism. Winding down. Controversies and criticism. Yeah, Ali took it all the way to the Supreme Court and he won. It violated his rights. Okay. Controversies and criticism. Corruption allegations and investigations. Corruption allegations and investigations. Ray Patterson. What's up, RP? How are you today? Ray Patterson, straight out of New Jersey. That Ray Patterson. What's up, RP? We're talking about the New York State Athletic Commission today. We're going to cover, but the New York State Athletic Commission was never assigned to anybody, but they were one of the main titles back in the day, 1920s through almost up to the 50s. That and the NBA were undisputed. So we're going to do the NBA next week. WBA, WBC, IBF, WBO, all going to follow. One a week. New series. Okay, so corruption allegations and investigations. Now, in the mid-20th century, the New York State Athletic Commission faced direct allegations of bribery involving its officials and judges. In 1958, boxing judge Harold Grant was indicted on 1 count of conspiracy and 10 counts of bribery for allegedly accepting payoffs ranging from $50 to $100 to influence decisions in 5 major fights, including fights involving Luis Rodolfo Rodriguez and Doug Jones. The charges stemmed from complaints by managers to the commission about predetermined outcomes. He cheap. This judge, $50, you had to give me more than some $50 and $100 to cheat. This judge just $50 to $100. No way. Wow. Okay, but yeah, he got caught with his head in the cookie jar. The managers complained to the commission. Now, earlier in 1947, boxer Rocky Graciano admitted discussing on now that's more like it. He admitted discussing a $100,000 offer to fix the fight. And this judge taking $50 and $100. Rocky Graciano said, I want $100,000. He admitted to discussing a $100,000 offer to fix the fight, prompting an immediate hearing by Commission Chairman Robert Egan, though no formal charges against Commission members resulted. These incidents highlighted vulnerabilities to external influence, but were isolated to individual actors rather than systemic commission-wide graft. How they know? Them just the ones that got caught. it could be systemic commission-wide, but they just didn't get caught, right? By the late 20th century, scrutiny shifted toward patronage and political favoritism, undermining operational integrity. In 2000, the commission drew criticism for appointing individuals tied to campaign donations, such as Mark Kornstein, following his father's $50,000 contributions to Governor George Pataki's campaign, and James Paulsonello after donating $27,000 for a $70,000 annual position. Additional concerns included unapproved international trips by commissioners Tony Russo and Bob Duffy, and job offers allegedly conditioned on party affiliation switches, as reported by boxing official Tom Hoover to the FBI. The FBI launched an investigation into these practices, alongside claims of widespread incompetence, enabling safety lapses, such as unlicensed judges in high-profile fights and near-fatal oversights in fighter matchmaking, though no public indictments or conclusions from the probe were disclosed. Commission Director Randy Gordon testified in 1993 U.S. Senate hearings on professional boxing corruption, defending New York practices amid broader industry fixes, but acknowledging persistent risks. Into the 2010s, reform efforts exposed ongoing internal issues. Appointed in 2014 by Governor Andrew Cuomo to address mismanagement, Executive Director David Berlin was demoted and effectively dismissed in May 2016 after flagging corruption, abuse of authority, and patronage. This followed a 2013 state interval review citing inconsistent administration, weak controls, and lapses exposed by lawsuits from a catastrophic Madison Square Garden fight. The commission then fell under investigation by the New York State Inspector General's office for these irregularities, with Berlin's ouster attributed to resistance against entrenched status quo practices. Berlin was the former executive director, right? He was dirty, real dirty. No criminal convictions emerged from this probe, but it underscored patronage's role in perpetuating administrative failures over outright bribery schemes. Allegations of fighter bribery, such as 1993 claims against Ray Mercer for offering payoffs, were refused by the commission to authorities, but did not implicate its leadership. Recent controversies, including a 2025 technical glitch during the Gervonta Davis-Lamont Roach fight that overlooked the knockdown, have fueled informal accusations of bias or incompetence, but lack evidence of formal investigations or corruption charges against the commission. Overall, while historical bribery cases involve direct financial misconduct, later probes centered on political patronage, eroding oversight with limited accountability outcomes, reflecting the commission's insulation within state bureaucracy. Now, that referee who was that referee in the Tank and Lamont Roach fight? I don't think he was corrupt or nothing. I just think he got caught off guard. When Tank went and took the knee and Kenny wiped his face, the referee was just like, what the hell is going on? I don't think he was corrupted. He just got caught off guard. Like, what the hell do I do? That's the look he had, like, what? And he just didn't do nothing. I think he just got caught off guard when Tank made that move, because nobody was expecting that. And he was like, what do I do? And then by the time he really noticed what was going on, Tank was back out there fighting. He told him, go ahead and fight. He didn't do anything. But yeah, that was just a case of just like, what the hell is he doing over there getting his face wiped? But he was supposed to. Once Kenny came up on the apron and wiped his face, Tank was supposed to be disqualified. because the second is not allowed anywhere near up on an apron unless to throw the towel in or in between the round. Other than that, it's a disqualification. Okay? Supposed to be anyway. But yeah, whoever that referee was, he was just caught off guard, like just lost. Like, what do I do? So he just didn't do anything. Right? Fighter safety failures. He just didn't do anything. Yeah, I think that was the case. He was just caught off guard with that. Right? Anyway, the New York State Athletic Commission has faced significant criticism for lapses in enforcing medical protocols and emergency responses that compromise fighter health in sanctioned fights. These failures often stem from inadequate post-fight assessments, delayed interventions, and inconsistent application of safety rules, contributing to severe injuries. A 2016 State Inspector General investigation highlighted systemic deficiencies, including unclear emergency procedures and conflicts of interest among officials, which undermined the Commission's mandate to prioritize participant welfare. One prominent case involved heavyweight boxer Magomed Abdusalamov, who sustained a trauma brain injury during his October 2nd, 2013 fight against Mike Perez at Madison Square Garden. Post-fight, despite visible symptoms including a bloodied face, slurred speech, and blood detected in his urine by Inspector Matt Farrago, the Commission physicians did not mandate immediate hospitalization. Instead, the boxer was directed to a taxi for a 15-minute ride to Roosevelt Hospital, bypassing the on-site ambulance that was at the venue. They had an ambulance at the venue, but they put the man in a taxi. Wow. All of them should have just been terminated immediately. You got an ambulance right there, you're going to put the man in a taxi. And by putting him in a taxi instead of the ambulance, that delayed critical treatment and resulted in multiple strokes, a coma, and permanent disabilities, including the inability to walk or speak. Now, they had an ambulance right there. They put the man in a taxi. Wow. The Inspector General's July 25th, 2016 report faulted the Commission Chair, Malvina Lathan, for failing to train staff on medical protocols, and Chief Medical Officer Barry Jordan for post-fight confusion, leading to a $22 million settlement with this by, I can't pronounce his name, Abdusalamov's family in September 2017 for negligence and malpractice. What the hell kind of training do you need if somebody got to go to the hospital to just put him in an ambulance instead of a taxi cab? You don't even need no training for that. An elementary school child would know that. This man got to go to the hospital. You don't call a taxi. The ambulance is right outside. You don't even need any training for that, right? Put the man in the ambulance. They called a taxi. But his family got $22 million. But the man can't walk or speak. Wow, that $22 million ain't bringing that back. Then, earlier incidents underscored recurring enforcement gaps in boxing. In March 2000, during Arturo Gatti's weigh-in against Joey Gamage, the Commission's inspector, Tony Russo, overruled colleague Bob Duffy to accept Gatti at 141 pounds, despite evidence of a 14-pound dehydration advantage, violating weight protocols and exposing Gamage to undue risk. During the fight, Gamage suffered a severe concussion and retinal damage, requiring hospitalization and eventual retirement, prompting a lawsuit against the Commission for facilitating a mismatched contest that endangered his life. Similar oversights included approving ill-matched fights such as Richie Milito versus Benito Fernandez in early 2000, and failing to enforce mandatory medical suspensions, which deprived injured fighters of recovery time and pay. So recent scoring and technical disputes. Okay, back to Tank and Lamont Roach again. There's Tank headed over there to get his face fixed. Come on, Kenny, hurry up. And Lamont Roach looking like, what's going on? The referee probably like, what the hell is he doing? Yeah, the referee wasn't corrupt. He was just caught off guard, you know? But anyway, it's crazy, ain't it, Al Booker? Recent scoring and technical disputes recently. In the lightweight title fight between Gervonta Davis and Lamont Roach Jr. on March 1st, 2025, at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, a controversial referee decision in the 9th round sparked significant debate over technical enforcement and its impact on scoring. Davis dropped to a knee after absorbing a left hook from Roach, but referee Steve Willis immediately waved off the incident without issuing an 8 count or ruling it a knockdown, allowing the action to resume without penalty. Video replays clearly showed Davis touching the canvas with intent to avoid further damage, which under unified boxing rules should have warranted a knockdown designation and potential point deduction or 10-8 rounds scoring for Roach. Plus, his second came up and wiped his face. That's disqualification, right? That's disqualification. There's no business up there on that apron without the round being over or not throwing the towel in. They're not supposed, no other reason to be up there. That should have been, Steve Willis really dropped the ball in that one. Much as I like Tank, he should have been disqualified in that one. He should have been disqualified. The New York State Athletic Commission initially attributed the non-review to a technical issue that prevented the replay official from assessing footage within the allotted time, despite production personnel later disputing this claim and confirming replay availability. Why did they even need replay? Everybody saw it, right? This oversight effectively denied Roach a likely round win, as two judges scored the fight 114-114 and the third 115-113 for Davis. So those two would have had it for Roach, and the third would have had it a tie, right? Instead of 2 points for Tank, resulting in a majority draw that allowed Davis to retain his WBA lightweight title. Roach's camp formally appealed, arguing the error cost millions in potential purse and title opportunities, but the commission upheld the result on March 7th, 2025, a week later, acknowledging the referee's error. They acknowledged that Steve Willis made an error while deeming post-fight alterations to scoring impermissible under their protocols. Critics, including boxing analysts and Roach's handlers, highlighted systemic flaws in the commission's instant replay implementation, introduced in 2019 to address such ambiguities, but inconsistently applied in high-stakes fights. Still, you didn't even need an instant replay. Everybody saw it. The man took a knee and the second wiped his face. Right? The fight should have been over. Not just a knockdown, it should have been over in the 9th round. Disqualification. The incident underscored ongoing concerns about referee discretion, overriding objective evidence, potentially influencing fight outcomes in a manner that favors established champions. Though the commission maintained the draw reflected the ringside judges' independent evaluations after the review. Now, how can the referee use his discretion? He's supposed to go by the rules. That's not no discretion thing there. The man took a knee. His second came up on the apron. You're not using no discretion. The rules are it's a knockdown and disqualification. Why do he need to use discretion? That's a knockdown and a disqualification per the rules. No further sanctions were imposed on Willis or officials, prompting calls for enhanced training and technology protocols to prevent recurrence. Willis should have been fined, or Willis should have been suspended. He should have, because he cost Roach that fight and money, because he would have been the champion, right? Willis should have definitely been suspended after that. That's what me and T. Hill was talking about the other day. Referees and judges should have to go to a post-fight press conference and answer. Willis should have had to go answer to the press for that. Like, why? How come you didn't disqualify him? How come you didn't call a knockdown? The rule is any part of your body during the round touched the mat due to a punch. It's a knockdown. And Roach had just hit Tank before he took the knee. And Kenny was clearly up there on the apron. So that's why referees and judges need to go to a post-fight press conference and explain this nonsense, man. Impact and legacy. Yeah, that was a bad one there. Yeah, that was a bad one. Impact and legacy. Standardization contributions. Yeah, that was terrible. The New York State Athletic Commission, established under the Walker Law on March 17, 1920, pioneered the first comprehensive state-level regulation of professional boxing, mandating padded gloves, licensed physicians at ringside, and structured round limits, typically 10 to 15 rounds for main events, which supplanted bare-knuckle prize fights and set a precedent for uniform contest formats across the United States. These standards address chaotic pre-regulation practices such as unregulated fight duration and inadequate equipment by enforcing weight class divisions and glove weight. 8 ounces for lighter divisions, 10 ounces for the heavyweight. Influencing other states' commissions, as New York hosted the majority of high-profile fights in the 1920s and 1930s. Now, the commission's medical protocols further standardized fighter safety, requiring pre-fight physical examinations by commission-designated physicians, including ophthalmological checks for retinal damage and post-fight evaluations, to impose mandatory suspensions for knockouts or head trauma, practices that became models for the Association of Boxing Commissions, formed decades later. Yeah, they got a lot of blame in this nonsense, the Association for Boxing Commissions, because all this nonsense the state commissions get away with, they supposed to police that, the ABC, the Association of Boxing Commissions, but they getting paid off. And then when the guy, the ambulance sitting right there, they're gonna send the guy to the hospital in a cab. All of them should have just been terminated immediately because that's inexcusable. That's inexcusable. Why do we have an ambulance at the venue? And then you couldn't find the ambulance driver or something? You're gonna send the guy to the hospital in a cab. And they said, because he could have been getting treated in the ambulance. Because in the ambulance, they can be talking to the doctors at the hospital and stuff, right? And no taxi cab driver gonna call a hospital, getting instructions from no doctor on the way and stuff. So, and that affected the guy. The guy can't walk or speak now after that. So, but that was the craziest one I ever heard of. All of those people should have been terminated immediately. All the medical personnel at the venue. But economic and industry effects, to finish it off. The legalization of professional mixed martial arts by the New York State Athletic Commission. We were talking about boxing. Let me go on past that. Finish this off. We're going to do the National Boxing Association next week. Now, boxing, long the New York State Athletic Commission's primary regulated sport, saw mixed economic efforts amid the MMA influx, with state tax revenue from boxing events rising 127% to $807,000 between September 2016 and August 2018, driven by larger gates and renewed promoter interest in New York venues. However, post-legalization fee hikes, including elevated promoter charges scaled by venue capacity and mandatory $1 million insurance policies for fighters covering brain injuries, drew criticism from boxing promoters like the Barfather and Lou DiBella. I know I had the Barfather up here or something. There's a Barfather. They was complaining about the insurance for the fighters and everything, right? For the brain injuries. The $1 million insurance policy for fighters covering brain injuries drew criticism from boxing promoters like the Barfather and Lou DiBella, who argued these costs could deter events and diminish New York's status as a boxing hub, potentially shifting fights to less regulated states. And the commission's licensing fees, such as $50 annual for MMA fighters versus $10 for boxers. I wonder why MMA fighters' license costs so much more. MMA fighters' license is $50, the boxers is $10. And that provides modest direct revenue to the commission for oversight, but represent a fraction of the broader. What's it represent? It represents a fraction of the broader industry taxes on ticket sales, 8.5% for MMA, 3% for boxing. In the wider industry, the commission's regulations facilitated New York's integration in the national MMA circuits, enabling consistent event scheduling at iconic arenas and creating ancillary opportunities in training facilities, medical services, and media production. Though elevated compliance costs have strained smaller promotions and independent circuit. Barfather just cheap. He got it. He just cheap. Total Combat Sports economic output reached $143 million in the 2 years after MMA legalization, up from $32 million pre-ban, underscoring the commission's role in unlocking market potential while imposing fiscal burdens that selected promoters claim favor larger organizations like the UFC. These dynamics highlight a trade-off, enhanced state coffers, and industry growth against higher barriers for niche or legacy boxing operations, with no independent audits confirming long-term net positive beyond limit event spikes. And finally, the persistent challenges to regulation. There are some challenges. The persistent challenges to regulation. And persistent challenges in regulation. Okay? In regulation. The New York State Athletic Commission continues to grapple with inconsistent enforcement of safety protocols, as evidenced by recurring lapses in medical oversight and post-fight care. A 2016 investigation by the New York State Inspector General revealed systemic deficiencies, including inadequate pre-fight neurological evaluations, failure to halt deteriorating fight promptly, and delayed emergency responses, exemplified in the November 2013 heavyweight fight where this is the guy, this Magomed sustained, same guy, life-altering brain injuries after exhibiting clear signs of distress that officials overlooked. And this was the same guy that they sent to the hospital in the taxi cab. Remember, ambulance sitting right there. Despite subsequent policy tweaks, such as enhanced training mandates, a 2025 analysis highlighted persistent echoes of these shortcomings, with commissions nationwide, including New York's, still prone to under-enforcing medical suspension guidelines and ambulance readiness requirements. And this study was just done in 2025. Yeah, I guess that's what happened with the CAB, ambulance readiness requirements. The ambulance wasn't ready, I guess. Wow. Technological, and this study was just done last year. Technological and officiating failures further undermine regulatory reliability, particularly in high-stakes fights. In the March 1st, 2025 lightweight title fight, here we go again. Davis and Roach, referee Steve Willis erroneously failed to issue a knockdown count, despite Roach landing a clear left hook that dropped Davis. That was a procedural violation. And that incident underscores broader challenges in real-time adjudication and backup systems, eroding fighter and promoter confidence in equitable enforcement. Administrative capacity and resource constraints exacerbate these issues, limiting proactive reform. The Commission's shielded budget structure, which evades routine legislative audits, has drawn scrutiny for hindering accountability, while chronic understaffing, cited in the 2016 report, as contributing to unscheduled errors, persists amid rising event volumes from legalized MMA. Proposed measures, such as requiring promoters to secure $1 million in brain injury coverage, aim to bolster financial safeguards to highlight ongoing reactive rather than preventive approaches to liability and risk management. Remember, the Bob Foster and Lou DiBella was complaining about that. They didn't want to do it. They didn't want to put the $1 million up for the brain injury coverage. Bob Foster said that's going to cause promoters to go away from New York if y'all put that in. I'm gonna take my fights elsewhere. But there you have it. The New York State Athletic Commission. Next week is the NBA. Tomorrow is Brian Castano. Life and career of Brian Castano. Hope everybody enjoyed that today. We're going to talk about the NBA next week, which became the WBA. And the following week, the WBA came in 1962, WBC, IBF, WBO. And we're going to do some minor ones too. We're going to look at some promotional companies and stuff too later. But Ray Patterson, Thomas Hill, Al Booger, The Drunk Irishman, BBO Sports TV, Mike Masick, Mike Rim, and Miss Cass. Appreciate everybody. That's the week. Wait a minute. It's just Thursday. We got one more day. Yeah, Brian Castano tomorrow. Life and career. We're going to see what he's doing because we haven't heard from him since he fought Mel. What was that, 2023? He had those two fights. He got those big paydays. They said their exchange rate down there is off the charts. The dollar is worth like $500 to whatever their currency, whatever their dollar is called down there. Our dollar is like 500 to 1 or something like that. Yeah, I heard that. So Brian Castano got them 2 Mel paydays. He's a billionaire in Argentina now. And you notice he never fought since then either. We're going to talk about him tomorrow. See what happened to him. Life and career of Brian Castano. A lot of people thought he won that first fight. I wasn't mad at the draw. But Mel made sure the next time Mel dropped him. Mel's last fight was Canelo. Yeah. They said Mel was been in training. He's been in training for like the last 2 years. But we'll see what happens for him. But Brian Castano tomorrow. Appreciate y'all. Just Do Boxing is coming up next. We'll be back tomorrow. If it's Monday through Friday, 2 p.m., It's the Boxtorian bringing you all that boxing history. This is Cast Sports, the Boxtorian. Everybody have a great afternoon. Appreciate y'all for all your support. Sent him to the hospital in a cab. Guess they couldn't find the ambulance. Everybody have a good day. Yeah, wow.